One Piece chapter 1125, it is titled What Death Means. The cover page continues with Yamato's pilgrimage as she's talking with the construction workers as they work to rebuild Oden Castle. However, Minatomo, the foreman, is missing, and if y'all don't know who this is, he is the foreman that Frankie was working under in order to get the plans for Orochi's castle. The chapter continues with the Marines still trying to recover after the Egghead incident. They are recharging the Seraphim, they're dealing with the weaponized Sea Beast and the Pacifista. However, Kaku and Lucci, they arrive, and Lucci states that he is the one that killed Stussy, and we know that that obviously isn't true because Kaku allowed for her to escape. But the reason why this is so interesting is because in the scans, it was stated that Stussy was killed in action, so we weren't exactly sure if Kaku lied to Lucci or not, because in chapter 1119 Kaku stated that he wouldn't be able to stop Stussy from being attacked by Lucci. I mean, he already did it to her in chapter 1191, and then you look at what Lucci said in chapter 1111 where he begged for Kaku's life to be spared. So saving Stussy isn't out of the realms of possibility. We know that she indeed did escape, but we don't know exactly how she escaped, if she had some assistance from anyone else, and where her current location is. Although the Marines technically achieved everything that they wanted when they went to Egghead, which involved York, the Punk records, and the power station, Saturn still believes there was a massive blunder and a hiccup with this incident, and that was because number one, the Straw Hats, Kuma and Bonnie, they escaped, as well as the broadcast that Vegapunk had that revealed everything that the Gorosei and the world government are trying to hide, and also Emmett assisting in the Straw Hats escape. And Emmett doing this makes this situation ironic because around 200 years ago, after Emmett's rampage at Marriage of Wa, he was supposed to be scrapped. However, Saturn wanted to make use of him in order to increase their military might and make weapons. So the fact that Saturn issued the order for Emmett to be saved and then, or I guess not destroyed, and then Emmett ended up saving Luffy, this whole incident, you could say it's Saturn's fault. Then something happened amongst the vice admirals that were in the room. Doran, he asked Saturn, since he used the word failure, does that mean that Vegapunk's words hold some truth? And when Saturn reacted to this, he ended up hitting and responding with an I-beam, the same one that did damage to Sanji earlier during this arc. I had wondered when the different Marines, and I guess not necessarily just them, but like in this context because they work for the world government, when they would start to question Vegapunk's broadcast, because it's some heavy information, and you know, there's not necessarily any confirmed truth to it, but you can only trust Vegapunk because of everything he's achieved so far. So I wonder who's going to remain loyal, who's going to desert the world government like Aokiji did. And then with Cross Guild going around, it's making the Marines' life in the world government really interesting. Apparently inside the lab there were some sky clouds that were forming, and York, she was trying to stop everything that happened because Edison, he decided to use the sky cloud in order to steal the Punk records from the Marines. So I guess technically the world government, they only got 2 out of 3, or I guess they kind of still got the Punk records because York, she's still connected, but they don't have it entirely. And then on top of that, Vegapunk, he, well, in the form of Stellus, he's still alive. So the world government didn't actually succeed as much as they thought they did. We finally got to see the Celestial Dragons here. We saw them a little bit during the broadcast, but the reason why I wanted to bring this up here is because recently Sabo talking about what was all achieved at the Reverie was animated, and he talked about the food supplies for the Celestial Dragons being hit, and so that was addressed a little bit more in this chapter. We see them struggling to obtain food, and to be fair, I don't necessarily want to say struggling, but I'd say more so struggling for their standards, because some of them, they couldn't get the meals that they exactly wanted. They had to skip meals. They couldn't eat all the snacks that they wanted. So it's really cool that Oda decided to touch on this point, because I'm not necessarily sure if we were ever going to get this, and I wonder if Oda decided to do this because the scene with the reverie was just animated. But if you guys have made it this far into the video and you're enjoying what you're watching, let me know by leaving a like, subscribing to the channel, and hitting the notification bell so you guys never miss out on a new video. We pump out different content all the time. This is probably, you could argue, it's either the most important or the second most important part of the chapter, and I guess you could argue that it should be 1A and 1B because they kind of connect with each other. But I want to talk about Garling because he appeared in the room of authority with new orders that York would be working under his supervision, and that he has the new rank of Science Warrior God, and that means that he ended up replacing Saturn as a member of the Gorosei. He sits down in front of them, and I ain't gonna lie, Saturn, he killed this scene. This brother, he has aura. I also wonder if Oda, he foreshadowed this, that Saturn was going to lose his title of Gorosei or an elder to Garling back in chapter 1086, because that was the chapter that Garling was introduced, as well as the title of that chapter was the Five Elders. This is important because it's safe to assume that the Five Elders, they've had their title since at least the Void Century, and it doesn't appear like the other Gorosei members had expected Saturn to be replaced. So Garling taking Saturn's spot here is huge, because does this mean that the other Gorosei members aren't safe? And why Garling? Because the Gorosei, they have the highest rank among the Celestial Dragons. So does that mean that the Figarland family holds that much weight? Which I guess that makes sense as to why Shanks was able just to walk into the room of authority and just have a casual meeting with the Gorosei. And now that Garling is a member of the Gorosei, does he still hold the title of the Supreme Commanders of the Holy Knight? And if not, then who does? Another thing to note is that the Gorosei, they are our mythical zones, and I know technically that hasn't been confirmed, but in order to keep stuff consistent and just make it overall easier to explain, they're under the assumption that they have mythical zones. So does Garling have a mythical zone? And if not, is he going to obtain one? We cut back to Egghead, and it appears to have some black smoke or black fire that is emerging out of Saturn, and he appears to be choking, losing breath. His skin is getting sunken in, and he's getting smaller. It honestly reminds me of when Green Bull would suck out the nutrients of people. I know it's not the same, but that's just what it reminds me of. But the reason why this is happening is because Emu is punishing Saturn because he allowed Joy Boy to escape. There's a massive amount of black fire or smoke that is happening, and the vice admirals that were on the ship, they go flying back, and a skeleton that we presume to be Saturn appears, meaning that he is dead. Did Saturn and the other Gorosei make a pact with the devil? And in that instance, it would be Emu, and he sent Saturn back to hell. There's also a few things I want to note. Number one, is Saturn truly dead? I know that we saw a skeleton, but it's One Piece, like, you know, people come back to life all the time. I do want to mention that if Saturn does come back, or when he does come back, don't be surprised, because it could actually be Katarina Devon, because remember, she touched him and now she has the ability to transform into him. And then number two, how did Emu do this? Was it a devil fruit power, or is it because the Gorosei are a part of his soul? And I guess you could also argue, is that connected to his presumed devil fruit power? I need answers. We know that the Vegapunks are still alive, and they successfully stole the Punk records, and even though York technically has access to it, it's better than she have the entire thing. Edison is the main body of the Stella, but everyone else is still alive, and they use spare parts, including Atlas's, Shaka's, and Pythagoras's. And since they can't leisurely tour the world because they're presumed dead, they're just walking around, and they come in contact with Weatheria. Now, I'm not entirely sure if the Stellas are going there, if they're going to remain hidden. We'll have to see. The chapter ends with the Revolutionaries. Koala, she is writing down the information that was provided by Vegapunk, and honestly, in these two panels, I feel like she summarized the entire broadcast, which took, I don't know, it just took a lot of chapters. I also love that Ivankov and Sabo, they talk about how there's truth to what Vegapunk said, and it brings more context as to why the Gorosei, they reside on top of the red line, because that's the highest point in the world, as well as there was different slaves that were building these high structures. So it brings light that the government, they knew all of this was going to happen. So it's up to the revolutionaries to hurry up and achieve victory before the people of the world start trying to kill each other in order to secure habitable land. A while ago, Oda's editor said that Egghead would conclude with a major incident and there would be a twist to the end, and I guess you could say that the twist would be Saturn getting killed by Emu and Garling replacing his role as a member of the Gorosei. I personally think that this is the official conclusion of Egghead and that we'll move on to Elbaf in the next chapter. If we don't, I don't necessarily think it would surprise me, simply because I believe we're supposed to get one more chapter next week and then there's supposed to be a break after that. So if Oda decides to start Elbaf after the break, I think that would make sense as well. But yeah, let me know how you guys feel about this chapter in the comment section below. I think this was one of the best chapters in Egghead, especially just for overall like the world government and how it affects the One Piece world. But thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you guys never miss out on a new video. Follow my Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok is on the screen and in the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and don't forget to unleash your potential.